On a freezing evening in 1987, inside a desolate public park in Volgograd, a horrifying crime shattered the winter silence forever. A young 19-year-old girl named Anya Komkova walked into the darkness, completely unaware that she was heading toward a fatal trap. Her lifeless body was discovered deep inside the park bushes, brutally mangled by a relentless weapon in a horrific display of violence. Forensic examiners counted 24 distinct knife wounds on the victim, signaling an unimaginable level of hatred and unbridled psychotic rage. The dark ink-like fluid pooled heavily on the cold ground, freezing instantly under the bitter Soviet winter wind of Volgograd. The investigator stands before the map of the region, reviewing the grim sequence of events that paralyzed the local community. Anya left her family home earlier that evening, promising her anxious parents that she would return before the night became too cold. When the clock struck midnight and the phone remained silent, her terrified mother began making desperate calls to every close friend. The local Soviet Militsiya quickly deployed Detective Alexander Tarasov to inspect the victim's quiet room for any hidden clues. Tarasov examined the small bookshelf, discovering numerous romantic novels that revealed the young girl's innocent dreams of finding true love. However, naive dreamers are often too trusting, making them easy prey for ruthless predators hidden within the ordinary society. A comprehensive list of Anya's acquaintances was assembled, including classmates from her technical school and neighbors from her building. The investigation led Tarasov straight to the electrical substation, where Anya had recently completed her technical school graduation assignment. A watchman recalled seeing Anya leave the facility alongside a handsome young electrician named Rudolf Dryomov that night. Dryomov possessed a distinctive appearance, marked by a thick, prominent mustache that made him easily recognizable to everyone. When summoned to the station the following morning, the young suspect arrived with a completely altered and unrecognizable appearance. The thick mustache was entirely shaved off, and his hair was cut crudely, raising immediate suspicions among the officers. Dryomov calmly claimed that he merely walked Anya to the tram stop before parting ways and returning to his family. His mother provided a solid alibi, swearing that Rudolf spent the entire evening at home watching film strips with his child. With no concrete physical evidence linking him to the park, the Militsiya had no choice but to release the electrician. Meanwhile, a young woman named Renata, who studied alongside Anya, felt a deep, unshakable dread creeping into her heart. Renata stared at a photograph of her missing classmate, wondering what kind of monster could commit such an atrocity. Her caring husband offered to go out into the freezing cold night to help search the surrounding neighborhoods for clues. Renata felt incredibly fortunate to have such a supportive partner, completely blind to the dark secrets buried beside her. Days passed, and Renata decided to prepare a traditional potato meal while waiting for her husband to finish his shift. Finding the old kitchen knife completely blunt, she reached into her husband's heavy winter jacket pocket for a pocket knife. Her smooth white fingers pulled out a sharp penknife, but her movements suddenly froze as she examined the steel blade. Suddenly, a harsh, commanding voice cut through the silent kitchen as her husband unexpectedly returned and snatched the weapon away. He aggressively warned her that the blade was far too sharp and dangerous for her to handle carelessly. Renata simple-mindedly accepted his defensive explanation, unaware that the dark ink-like residue belonged to her brutally murdered friend. The investigation team extended their search perimeter beyond the Central Park pathways, scanning the dense and frozen thickets for hidden evidence. Every frozen branch was thoroughly inspected under the cold, dim beams of flashlights to ensure no clue remained overlooked. A sudden whisper from the heavy winter wind echoed through the desolate park, intensifying the grim and chilling atmosphere. The investigator returns to the quiet studio, contemplating the intricate web of deception that shields the true face of malice. While the Militsiya processed the park evidence, a completely separate tragedy was quietly unfolding in another sector of the city. An 18-year-old technical school student named Volodya Yashin failed to return home, triggering instant panic within his family. Volodya was a responsible young man, preparing to join the military to defend his homeland with pride and dedication. His anxious mother spent the entire night pacing near the window, staring into the dark, frozen streets of Volgograd. The terrifying connection was immediate, as both missing youths attended the exact same local technical school in the city. Rumors of a ruthless serial predator targeting the technical school students quickly spread, causing widespread fear across the neighborhood. The grim answer arrived when a group of young children playing with sleds stumbled upon a terrifying sight. Deep within a secluded ravine, a pale, lifeless arm was seen protruding straight out from the heavy winter snow. The bitter winter frost had slowly pushed the hidden corpse upward, revealing the tragic fate of the missing student. The Militsiya cordoned off the entire ravine as forensic experts prepared to recover the heavily mutilated body. Forensic examiners confirmed that Volodya Yashin suffered multiple horrific knife wounds, inflicted with the exact same savage pattern as Anya. The relentless killer had spent at least an hour torturing the poor student inside the dark, isolated ravine. The victim's valuable electronic watch was entirely missing from his wrist, indicating a secondary motive of cruel robbery. Detective Alexander Tarasov proposed a vital theory, asserting that the killer must live incredibly close to this hidden ravine. Only a local resident would possess intimate knowledge of such an isolated and treacherous location during the winter. Suspicion immediately fell upon a notorious local criminal named Boris Mityaev, known for terrorizing and extorting the weaker youths. Mityaev was a sadistic brute, frequently using physical intimidation to force his young victims into absolute, terrified silence. Tarasov ordered a discreet surveillance operation, keeping a constant watch on Mityaev's daily movements around the neighborhood. However, the brutal thug behaved perfectly, avoiding any aggressive altercations, as if aware of the heavy police presence. While the surveillance operation stalled, a sudden breakthrough walked directly into the office of investigator Gennady Kiktev. A heavily bruised former student named Artyom Korolyov arrived at the station, trembling with immense fear and anxiety. Artyom revealed a completely bizarre and unconventional relationship with an older, wealthy woman named Nina Petrovna. Nina Petrovna was 45 years old, funding her luxurious lifestyle by illegally fencing stolen goods across Volgograd. Artyom submissively lived in her apartment, relying on her financial generosity while helping her handle various shady dealings. A few nights prior, two dangerous local criminals knocked on her door to deliver a specific piece of merchandise. Artyom was ordered to wait inside the kitchen, where he covertly overheard a terrifying negotiation regarding a stolen watch. Artyom distinctly heard Boris Mityaev describing a highly unique electronic watch with multiple distinct cracks spreading outward from a heavy physical impact. The specific description of the broken watch perfectly matched the exact device owned by the tragically murdered technical school student Volodya Yashin. Realizing he had unwittingly stumbled upon an active homicide case, Artyom remained frozen inside the dark kitchen, barely daring to breathe. The two dangerous criminals concluded their illegal transaction with Nina Petrovna, pocketing a thick stack of Soviet ruble banknotes. As they walked toward the front door, the criminals suddenly noticed Artyom's winter boots sitting quietly inside the narrow apartment hallway. Realizing their secret negotiation had been completely compromised, the ruthless brutes immediately suspected that the young man knew too much. The following afternoon, Mityaev and his dangerous accomplice cornered Artyom on a desolate, snow-covered street corner near his house. They aggressively assaulted him, inflicting severe bruises across his body to deliver an absolute and terrifying warning to remain silent. The criminals directly threatened his life, swearing that any leak to the authorities would result in his immediate and painful execution. Despite the intense physical intimidation, Artyom secretly chose to risk everything because the murdered student was his closest technical school friend. Artyom provided the second suspect's name, identification, and criminal history, pointing directly toward a hardened local ex-convict named Gubin. Gubin had recently returned to Volgograd after serving a long, brutal prison sentence for multiple violent offenses across the region. Detective Tarasov carefully analyzed the complex profile, realizing that both Gubin and Mityayev possessed the capacity for extreme, unbridled violence. To secure an absolute conviction, Tarasov engineered an exceptionally clever and deceptive tactical psychological manipulation plan within the station walls. A coordinated operational strike force was deployed to simultaneously arrest both suspects before they could coordinate any false stories. Boris Mityayev was apprehended inside a local tavern, entirely blind to the extensive police net closing heavily around his position. Simultaneously, Gubin was cornered inside his small, heavily cluttered apartment room, offering zero physical resistance to the armed officers. Both criminals were brought down to the Soviet Militsiya headquarters, placed into completely isolated and dark interrogation rooms. Tarasov ordered his fellow detective to place Boris Mityayev into the first room, forcing him to write an endless autobiography. Mityayev sat quietly under a single lamp, desperately scribbling random details on a blank sheet of paper for over an hour. Next, Tarasov slowly escorted Gubin down the hallway, deliberately passing the open doorway where Mityayev was actively writing. Gubin peered through the glass window, observing his bulky accomplice completely immersed in documenting what appeared to be a confession. An immediate surge of intense psychological panic completely overwhelmed Gubin. Assuming his criminal partner was laying the blame entirely on him, he terrifiedly turned to Detective Tarasov, desperately demanding a magnetic tape recorder to quickly confess his full involvement first. Gubin feared that if Mityayev finished writing his document earlier, the court would view Boris as a cooperative witness instead. The brilliant psychological trap worked perfectly, and the magnetic tape began spinning, capturing the dark details of Volodya Yashin's final hours. Gubin confessed that they ambushed the young student on his walk home after he attempted to defend an unknown girl. The two thugs dragged Volodya deep into the isolated ravine, unleashing a relentless torrent of savage violence upon his body. They brutally stabbed him over a period of an hour, entirely motivated by cruel sadism and a desire for his watch. The brutal murder of Volodya Yashin was completely resolved, yet the primary mystery surrounding Anya Komkova's execution remained entirely open. With Gubin and Mityayev strictly detained for Yashin's murder, Detective Alexander Tarasov refocuses entirely on the unsolved execution of young Anya Komkova. The detailed forensic files of Anya's 24 knife wounds are meticulously reviewed once more to extract any hidden geographical connection. Tarasov spends hours staring at the map of Volgograd, tracing the physical distance between the Central Park and the electrical substation. The investigator remains solitary inside the dark studio, reflecting on the heavy silence that inevitably precedes a massive breakthrough in homicide cases. A sudden knock shatters the quiet corridor as another young woman walks into the Militsiya station, carrying a deeply terrifying testimony. The frightened citizen named Masha sits down before the detectives, her entire body trembling violently from a recent, horrifying street encounter. Masha explains that 2 months prior, a strange man suddenly grabbed her by her long hair on a dark, empty road. The unknown assailant brandished a sharp pocket knife, aggressively demanding to know her destination while holding the steel blade against her neck. Terrified for her life, Masha used her immense cleverness, lying that she was heading directly to meet a dangerous local gang authority. The deceptive mention of the prominent criminal gang authority successfully startled the predator, forcing him to reluctantly lower his sharp weapon. The man suspiciously chose to walk alongside her for several blocks, maintaining a heavy, silent, and immensely suffocating psychological pressure. Masha managed to escape his presence safely that night, desperately attempting to erase the entire terrifying memory from her young mind. However, exactly 2 months later, she unexpectedly crossed paths with the very same terrifying individual on a crowded local street. The man had drastically altered his facial appearance, Yet the cold, piercing aura of pure malice remained entirely unchanged. Recognizing the silent death threat hidden within his posture, Masha immediately fled the scene and ran directly to the Militsiya station. She provided the critical description, emphasizing that the aggressive suspect previously possessed a very thick mustache but had recently shaved it. Detective Alexander Tarasov immediately connected the crucial clue, remembering his very first suspect, the shifty young electrician named Rudolf Dryomov. Dryomov had shaved his thick mustache immediately before his first interrogation, offering a completely absurd explanation to hide his identity. With a strong secondary witness testimony confirming his violent predatory habits, Tarasov finally secures a formal warrant for his immediate arrest. Tarasov enlists the assistance of senior local officer Vladimir Mishchenko to conduct the high-stakes operational arrest at the suspect's residence. The tactical operational team silently arrives at the gray residential complex, moving carefully through the dark, ice-crusted concrete courtyard. They quickly ascend the narrow concrete stairs, approaching the designated wooden door, where the dangerous predator resides with his family. A sudden, heavy police command shatters the domestic quietness as officers surround Rudolf Dryomov inside his small living room. Dryomov stands completely frozen in absolute shock, offering zero immediate physical resistance as the steel handcuffs lock around his wrists. The suspect is immediately brought into the official identification room to undergo a formal, legally structured lineup procedure. Dryomov is positioned within a structured line alongside two simple civilian extras, all maintaining a rigid and completely silent posture. Masha peers quietly through the dark observation glass, examining the smooth white profiles of the three standing figures carefully. Without a single moment of hesitation, her featureless hand points directly toward the center figure, identifying the shaved predator. The formal identification shatters the suspect's psychological defenses entirely, leaving him completely broken inside the cold interrogation room. As the morning sun cold-lighted the concrete facility, Rudolf Dryomov finally began giving his full confession regarding Anya's death. Rudolf Dryomov detailed his hidden obsession with submissive girls, explaining how he carefully targeted quiet victims who rarely fought back against intimidation. The electrician admitted he actively pursued Anya, deliberately concealing his marriage to make the naive girl believe in a promising romantic future. On that winter evening, Dryomov cornered Anya inside the public park after dark, immediately trying to push his physical advances upon her. Anya firmly rejected his aggressive behavior, asserting her strict personal principles and delivering a sharp slap straight across the predator's face. The sudden physical resistance instantly triggered a massive surge of psychotic fury inside Dryomov, destroying any remaining shred of human restraint. He brutally struck the 19-year-old girl onto the frozen concrete pathway, causing her to fall heavily onto the white snow. Anya struggled to stand, courageously declaring that she would immediately report his violent assault to the local Soviet Militsiya station. The direct threat of a long prison sentence pushed Dryomov over the edge, forcing him to draw his pocket knife from his jacket. He unleashed a merciless attack, driving the sharp steel blade through her clothing repeatedly to eliminate any possible witness to his crime. Dryomov counted each violent strike, maintaining a chilling, methodical focus until the young girl completely ceased moving on the cold snow. After delivering 24 fatal wounds, the electrician dragged her mangled body deep into the thick bushes to conceal the grim scene. The thick, ink-like fluid dripped slowly along the frozen ground, freezing almost instantly under the bitter, unyielding night air of Volgograd. Dryomov calmly walked back to his ordinary apartment, quietly washing the blade and hiding the pocket knife inside his winter jacket pocket. He deliberately fabricated a family alibi, demanding his mother to tell the Militsiya that he spent the evening watching film strips. The investigator returns to the solemn studio, analyzing the terrifying psychological detachment required to commit such a ruthless, calculated execution. When the Militsiya summoned him for his first inquiry, Dryomov experienced a sudden surge of severe, panicky self-preservation. He rushed to the bathroom mirror, violently shaving off his very thick mustache to alter his prominent facial identity completely. He crudely cropped his own hair with rusted kitchen scissors, assuming the dramatic change would totally baffle the detective's memory. The calculated deception initially succeeded, allowing the predator to walk out of the station and continue roaming the streets freely. Dryomov even participated in the public search efforts for Anya, secretly monitoring the investigation progress to adjust his defense. He visited the hidden crime scene after dark, ensuring the body remained obscured under the heavy brush before spring arrived. The calculated cunning of his behavior completely astounded the seasoned Militsiya officers as the full truth was thoroughly exposed. Dryomov's wife, Renata, refused to accept the horrifying evidence, desperately walking through police corridors to defend her husband's character. She tearfully insisted that Rudolf was an incredibly caring father, totally incapable of committing such a savage and bloody atrocity. However, when presented with his signed, handwritten confession, her complete denial collapsed into absolute, crushing psychological devastation. The horrifying revelation shattered the family forever, forcing Renata to immediately file for a formal divorce and leave Volgograd. The entire working-class collective of the electrical substation submitted formal petitions, demanding the highest possible penalty for Dryomov. Due to the changing judicial guidelines of the late Soviet period, the Supreme Court ultimately rendered a 15-year sentence. The local community felt deep dissatisfaction with the verdict, believing a 15-year term was far too lenient for a monster. Justice was ultimately served by fate itself, as both Mityaev and Gubin perished miserably inside the brutal remote penal colonies.